We come closer to answering the question, are we in a recession? Is the economy of the United States on the road to recovery? How all of this affects your house, your job, your savings, and your debt. Well, gas prices are high, but wait until you hear the new Memorial Day prediction. And one big sticking point with one of the presidential candidates' health care plans. Issue number one is the economy. Issue number one starts right now. Well, welcome to issue number one. I'm Ali Velshi. Jerry Willis will be along in just a moment. Well, it's settled. The U.S. economy is not in a recession. At least according to some. According to the government, GDP, gross domestic product, the largest and most commonly used measure of the economy, was unchanged in the first 3 months of 2008. The government says the U.S. economy actually grew by 0.6%. Now, that's not much, but it's much better than some people expected. How accurate is GDP as a measure? Let me tell you a little bit about GDP. Here's how we've been defining it. Gross domestic product is the total market value of goods and services produced within a given country in a given period of time. Well, what's that got to do with you? A lot of people use GDP as a measure of whether or not we've gone into a recession. Now, you will have maybe heard some false descriptions of what a recession is. The National Bureau of Economic Research is an organization that tracks and measures recessions. They're kind of the official arbiter of it. Here's what they had to say. The NBER does not define a recession in terms of 2 consecutive quarters of decline in real GDP. Rather, a recession is a significant decline in economic activity spread across the economy lasting more than a few months. Well, if you take that description of a recession, you might think differently about where we are. We know we've had job losses. We know we've had lower home prices and falling home sales and high inflation and gas prices. So what's the problem right now? Let's ask some people who know about this. Lakshman Achutan is the managing editor of the Economic Cycle Research Institute, and Peter Schiff is the president of Euro-Pacific Capital and the author of Crash Proof, How to Profit from a Coming Economic Collapse. Welcome to both of you. Lakshman, you've been pretty clear. By the way, the Federal Reserve is meeting right now, and within 2 hours or so, they'll give us a decision on interest rates. Some people are expecting a cut. You think we're in a recession?
Absolutely. We are in a recession, as you're suggesting here in your preamble, that the reality, the economic reality outside your window is much harsher than any of these numbers suggest. And also, I would not bank on these numbers staying these numbers. These numbers are going to be revised not once but twice in the next 2 months. The revisions are likely to be downward, and then you're going to get a really big revision a year from now, which around the vicinity of downturns is almost always to the downside. So I am not, even looking at this number being slightly positive, I am not at all challenged in my view that there is a recession. You've got months on end of job losses. That's the real economy for a lot of people.
Peter, you almost take a similar position. You just don't think these numbers represent what's going on in America.
Sure, I thought we were going to have a bit of a debate here, but actually I agree. But these numbers are phony. In order to get a 0.6% annualized rate of growth for the first quarter, the government is telling us that inflation in the first quarter was only running at 2.6%. Now, that's ridiculous. There's no way inflation is that low. It's at least twice that, if not 3 or 4 times that. We're already in a decline.
Let's touch on that. In a little over 2 hours, we're going to hear from the Fed. Let's say they cut rates. What happens when you cut rates? It makes money cheaper to borrow. It means businesses can borrow money. Perhaps they expand. Perhaps they hire more people. Those people end up maybe paying more taxes. They've got lower rates on their adjustable rates because the prime rate goes down, and it gives consumers more money to spend. Peter, you're nodding your head like that's not a good thing.
It's not what's going to happen. All that's going to happen is cheaper money is going to make goods more expensive, like food, like energy. That's why prices are rising, and businesses aren't going to loan more money to American consumers. They can't pay back the money they've already borrowed.
Explain that to me. Why is that going to make things more expensive?
Well, what's happening right now is you've got a credit crunch going on. The people in the markets don't trust one another. So the Fed is trying to give you and I and everyone else some cheaper money so that we can afford things a little bit better. What's happening is it's getting caught in the system. And the credit markets, instead of passing that on to consumers in the form of lower rates, are saying, we don't trust everybody. What's the safest thing for us to do? What's the safe haven for us? It's actually going long, investing, making bets on food and energy, which actually hurts the consumer. So the Fed is in a very tight spot.
So as they lower interest rates in an attempt to goose the economy, what they've done is they've goosed the price of wheat, of corn, of soybeans, of eggs, of oil.
But they shouldn't be trying to goose the economy. The economy needs to go through this recession. The problem is we borrowed and spent too much money. What we don't need now is more of the same. We need to start saving again. We need to start producing again. And that means a recession.
I think we might have some disagreement
now.
Here.
We got
Finally.
Finally, we got to debate. Sure, we have excesses, and you need to work them off, and you have to pay the piper. A housing boom, a credit debacle. There is no way around dealing and paying for those mistakes. However, I don't think it requires a recession. A recession brings with it a lot of collateral damage to people who had nothing to do
for
with these
instance,
excesses.
People who end up losing their jobs in a recession.
You know, there's a guy, you know, he's got a hardware store, he's cruising along, he had nothing to do with any of this shenanigans with the housing boom or the subprime market stuff, and he's in trouble here. People who are dealing with discretionary consumer spending, not food and energy stuff, these people are under pressure.
But the problem is, if you've got an economy that's now 70% consumer spending, and consumers have to stop spending and start saving, you just can't make that transition without a recession. So we don't want to resist it, though. These are natural forces that we need to cleanse this economy.
Well, all right. We'll keep the debate going for 2 seconds here. The credit crisis is a problem, right? Where the Fed's tonic of lower interest rates is toxic. It's spiking up food and energy. Now, if we had avoided a recession, if we had avoided these job losses that we're going to hear about later on this week, okay? Yeah. Then your increases in foreclosures would start to dissipate a bit. Instead, foreclosures are going up, pushing home prices down, making the credit problem worse. So my only point is that avoiding a recession, the actual contraction, gives you some breathing room.
But I don't think it's avoidable. I think the job losses are going to come, and home prices are much too high. They have to collapse. There's no way to stop that. The government is trying to prevent it, but the problem is they got bid up in a speculative bubble. They have to come down.
And they have been coming down for a little while. I'm just saying it's easier to deal with this stuff outside of a recession, inside of a slowdown.
Well, but in 2 hours, we're going to find out if the Fed's paying attention to both of you guys. Peter Schiff, thank you for joining us. Right, Lakshman Achutan as well. Thank you.